What's up, guys? Welcome to The Smart Student. My name is Chelsea Seaburn, where today we're going to talk about paraphrasing. Finally, this is video 3 out of 4, where in the first 2, we talked about everything that had to do with plagiarism. So at this point, we know that plagiarism is essentially stealing in the academic world. It's using someone else's thoughts, ideas, you name it, and trying to pass it off in your own research papers, writing. And so we want to avoid that. And one of the biggest ways to do that is through paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is using that other person's ideas, but you're rewording them using new language. So you're taking their idea and you're making it yours. You still have to credit that original author, but now you're safe to use it in your papers. And quite frankly, academic writing is made up of a lot of paraphrased material, which is why it's important we learn how to do this correctly. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump into the exact steps that you need to take in order to paraphrase correctly. And quite frankly, I want to level with you guys because when it comes to learning how to paraphrase, it's an art and it's difficult to learn. And when I've researched and I've looked online and seeing how other people teach you guys to paraphrase, it's essentially the same reiterated steps over and over that sound good on paper, but they're really hard to apply because they're not practical. At least they're not taught practically. So I'm going to give you guys my unfiltered steps on how to paraphrase. We're going to look at it through the lens of how I paraphrased when I was in school. And mind you, depending on where you're at in the spectrum of paraphrasing, whether you're a beginner or you're advanced, you may not take all of the steps. So I'm going to do my best to explain each one, and then you'll need to use your discretion on where you fall. All right, let's get started with step number 1. Set your intention. This isn't something I see taught very often that I really wish was. So how many of you can relate to when you're researching for a paper, a lot of times you don't know what you're looking for. So you're kind of just researching blindly, hoping something is going to pop out at you. And when that something does pop out at you, then you start figuring out how to paraphrase. That's what you want to use in your paper. I don't like teaching students to do it this way. Instead, I highly recommend setting a goal for your research. So when you're writing a paper and you're focusing on a section, you're generally trying to fulfill an objective. What objective are you trying to fulfill and what is your goal about it? Because once you understand that, then you can do smart research. You can go find credible sources easier and you know what you're looking for. So it's a lot easier to paraphrase. So step number 1, always set your intention when you're researching because this is going to trickle down into how effective you are at paraphrasing. Now, step number 2, read until you grasp the meaning. So step number 1, you set your intention, you found a source, it's credible. Now you're reading to find material that you'd like to use in your paper to back up that objective, okay? So when you're reading it, make sure you read until you fully understand. Grasp its meaning is the most important part of this step, and it's a bit hazy for a lot of students. Again, let me know if you can relate to this, but you find a section you'd like to paraphrase because it meets the quota in your paper. How many of you just read that section? So you end up trying to paraphrase, say, 1 paragraph or 3 sentences. This makes it very difficult because what I recommend doing is read around that passage. A lot of times the information on the outskirts of that one idea you're trying to paraphrase can help you understand the meaning, and the better you understand something, the easier it is going to be for you to paraphrase. Because I'm going to let you in on a little secret. If you're trying to paraphrase something and it's just not coming out, it's because you don't understand what you're trying to paraphrase. So pro tip number 2 with this step is if you are trying to paraphrase and you're having those roadblocks, go read more information. Go find another source to tell you about this topic you're trying to research, because the more information you gather, the easier it's going to be for you to paraphrase. Now, just to be clear, as long as you're not reading different ideas about that topic in these other sources, you can come back to that one source now that it's clear, and you only have to cite that one. But again, if you read another source about the topic and it's completely a different angle, a different idea about it, then keep in mind you'd have to cite both of them. But for that one that you're trying to paraphrase, if you don't understand it, go read more information about it. Once you have your understanding, you can move on to step number 3, which is to identify what about this concept you're trying to paraphrase. And so this is where, depending on if you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced at paraphrasing, this step will look different for you. So a lot of times when you get better at paraphrasing, this is going to happen as a thought process. As you're reading, as you're researching and understanding, you're going to be identifying how that source meets the goal that you set in step 1. So the intention that you're trying to fulfill as you're researching and reading these sources, you're going to be thinking about how it fits in there, and you're going to be qualifying it, if you will, as a credible source to use in your paper as research. However, if you're on the beginner side, you're just getting used to writing, paraphrasing is really hard and intimidating, you might actually quite literally identify the concepts that you'd like to use in your paraphrase by, say, putting them in a separate Word document, maybe even writing them down, but putting a couple keywords and phrases somewhere, so that way when you're thinking about it, you can remember, okay, I'm trying to meet this objective with these 3 different points this article talks about it, and then you can move on to building your paraphrase. But once you've done that, you're in good shape. You can move on to the next step, which I don't remember what number we're on. So let's just say next step, go ahead and write your paraphrase. Again, depending on your level of expertise here, this is going to look different. Some people can go ahead and just type it out and get it right. On the first time, you might have to change a few things while you're doing it, but a lot of times when you're at this level, you can keep the source open and you can read it and kind of refer to it, so that way you write your paraphrased section correctly. If you're on the more beginner side, you might need to put that passage away. Put the book away, put whatever it is you're researching out of your mind, because it can be hard sometimes to have it right there and then write something differently. So this is going to depend on you, where you use your discretion. But at this point, go ahead and write down your paraphrased version. But once you're finished writing that out, you feel satisfied with it, you're gonna move on to the next step, which is to compare the two. And you may actually skip this step if you are on the more advanced side, because you might have already been comparing it as you wrote your paraphrase. But basically, you just want to ensure that what you wrote is not too similar to the paraphrase material, that you did indeed reword it using your own words, and that you're not copying their material too close to verbatim. Now, I will say, if you do compare the two and you see that, okay, there's a few phrases and sentences, it is a little too similar, go ahead and reword it. If you need to go read another passage somewhere else, again, to improve your understanding, go do that and then come back and reword your paraphrase section until it's paraphrased correctly. And remember, you can always use a plagiarism checker if you're unsure. So that's always great if you're new to paraphrasing and you haven't quite got down the art of how to do this, all right? And then finally, moving on to the next step, go ahead and create your citation. It's always going to be a full reference list entry followed by the corresponding in-text citation, which for most of you, you're going to be following APA 7th edition formatting guidelines. But just remember, even if you're paraphrasing or directly quoting, especially if you're directly quoting, you need to cite the source correctly. You still have to give credit to the author because you are using their ideas. But I just want to reiterate one last time, use that plagiarism checker if you're unsure. Remember from the previous video that a good paper, you should fall somewhere below 10% on the plagiarism score. There's always going to be at least a little bit in there, but you want to make sure you're in the single digits. Anytime you start getting into those double digits, you're going to need to fix something, because remember, your professor is not being hard on you. They're running your paper through a plagiarism checker as well. And so if you score in those double digits, their hands are tied. They're going to have to count you off. So go ahead and do your due diligence and check yourself. But that's it for now. I have one more video in this series, which I will see you in a few days for that. And by the way, if you enjoyed this video, you like this content, a great way to support your creators is by using YouTube Thanks, which is one of the most awesome features YouTube has ever given out. You can find it down below where you like and subscribe. And basically it allows you to show your support by letting the creator know which videos you like, which topics you want to see more of, or just that you're there and you're supporting them. So thank you guys for being here. I will see you in video number 4.